Our second speaker is Katie Moon from University of Colorado Boulder. And Katie, please, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes.
All right. So as a last speaker, last presenter of the last paper, I would like to give thanks to the organizer of the conference. This is indeed a great conference because it's dedicated to the information in the financial markets. And really thanks for your effort and everything. Of course, this paper, our paper, is also about information, and we are interested in imprecise information. So the project is with my colleague at Colorado, Tony Cookson, and Jungi No from Case Weston. Both of them are here, and Tony is answering questions in Slack. Okay, so let me talk about clarity of writing. Clarity of writing is very important in financial disclosure, especially because companies can communicate successfully with their investors. So SEC encourages this clarity of writing and financial disclosure through many channels. And the first one, they published the Plain English Handbook in 1998 to teach companies how to communicate with the investor in easy English language. And the second, they enacted the Plain Writing Act in 2010. And then in general, they discourages the use of this complicated things or vague things, such as long sentences, legalese, financial jargons, abstract word, unnecessary details, passive voice, and weak verbs. That's what they specifically try to discourage. In academia, like a lot of the finance and accounting literature focuses on complexity when they talk about clarity of writing. For example, in 2008, Lee published a paper using the Garning's-Fogg index, and the author finds that 10K readability is significantly associated with the future earnings of the company. And then the author attributes the link to the managers hiding information when they have a future poor performance. But I want to ask a question, is this really complexity hurt the clarity of writing always? So this is the first page of the first sentence of a Plain English Handbook that SEC published. And the first sentence SEC says, "We will start by dispelling a common misconception about plain English writing. It does not mean deleting complex information to make the document easier to understand." So this can be a popular misconception. Complexity can always hurt the clarity of writing. And there are follow-on papers in finance and accounting literature. Complex language also can convey important complex informations. For example, Bloomfield in 2008, in response to Lee 2008, argues back that complex language could be necessary to convey information about firms' complicated business transactions and operating strategy. Another recent paper by Bush et al. Took a further step to decompose complex language into two latent components. First one is obfuscation, and the second one is the information component, and shows that the information component indeed is decreasing information asymmetry. So we are in the same vein, and our main argument of the paper is that imprecise language can also convey important information, but imprecise yet immature information of the company. We show that imprecise language could be necessary to convey the firm's immature information on forthcoming, upcoming, positive, but yet uncertain prospect of the future cash flows. So for example, this is like academic writing. It's my own paper I wrote 2017. And then elaborately, I tried to make statement here, imprecise, and I added the word likely there because I want to talk about precisely the situation involving probability. I did not want to obfuscate. Something like that, companies can add some imprecise wording there to describe precisely the imprecise situation. So let me show you what we did and then what we find and how we interpret our result. We investigate how market participants react to imprecise language appearing in firms' disclosure. That's one big picture question. We face empirical challenges, of course, because there is no dictionaries for imprecise language. We have to come up with our own dictionary. So we develop a list of the keyword and a measure of linguistic imprecision in a way to minimize the researcher's subjectivity by using Wikipedia as a crowdsourced solution. So equipped with this tool, we find imprecise language in the 10K disclosure actually predicts future permanent and positive abnormal returns and reduces future information asymmetry in the near subsequent period and predicts positive earnings surprise in the near future. We interpret these findings as that imprecise language in 10K contains value relevant information on positive but yet immature prospect of the future cash flows. Market participants, including investors and analysts, initially underreact to this information, but eventually digest quickly within a few weeks. All right, this is our how we created our dictionary for imprecise language. To construct a measure of linguistic imprecision as objective as possible, we analyze Wikipedia articles and embedded weasel tags in the articles. Wikipedia advises its users to attach weasel tags when they encounter sentences that have a vague, unverifiable information. And they provided 3 categories of these vague situations. First is a numerically vague expression such as many, a number of, and second, passive voice, such as it is sad or it is anticipated. And the third case is adverbs that weaken, such as probably and the word like likely. This is actual example from Wikipedia, the article for digital pets. So the first line, I made a blue color there. Some people, and people put their weasel tag because the some sounds like a numerically vague expression. Some people suggest that digital pets are preferable for a number of reasons. This is a sentence that has a weasel tag. So we extract the sentences like this with weasel tags from 17 million Wikipedia articles. And for any of you who want to use a Wikipedia article, they publicly release Wikipedia dumps at this site. And we obtain approximately 16,000 unique words from these sentences with the weasel tags. So in the previous example, we extract the sentence with this sentence. Some people suggest that digital pets are preferable for a number of reasons. The bold-faced fonts here, some, a number of. Later in our dictionary, it is included as imprecise keyword. We didn't stop there. We also extract the sentences called control sentences that occur 3 sentences later in the same article. So in the previous example, there is a red underlined article. Another cousin argument is that digital pet can successfully substitute a real one for children, those who suffer from allergies. This is taken as a control sample, control sentences, and we use a salience screen to have only meaningful and overuses keyword in weasel sentences only. So these are the most frequently used word in the weasel sentences, not considering the control sentences. As you see, Unigrams has a lot of stuff, not meaningful word like the and the trigram, you see it has been or is one of. Okay, someone is talking. Can you please unmute?
Yeah, I muted them. Sorry.
All right, yeah. So after salience screening suggested by Goldsmith and Pinkham 2017, we see now meaningful unigrams as well. we see like some, many, although, considered, may, said, have, argued, believed, often. These are the hallmarks of our keywords. Okay, the final dictionary, we have about like 150 unigrams, bigrams, and trigrams. And then we created our main right-hand side variable, which is imprecision, as equal to the number of imprecision keyword divided by total number of the word used in the 10K document for a given font for a given year. We first look at the relations. We can examine the relations with to other measures widely used in academia, like Logan and McDonald Master Dictionary, Imprecision is positively related to fog index, complexity index, and Logan and McDonald measures of uncertainty, weak modality, and sentiment. Sentiment is the number of positive words minus negative word as in percentage term. So this is meaningful because our linguistic imprecision contains the complexity and uncertainty and some sort of modality, and also it contains a positive sentiment as well. So it's also broader than those already used concept in financial literature. And then even after purging all these measures, we also have a very robust result after that. Let me get straight one thing before I jump in our result. Our textual corpus is a 10Ks. It's a different from free-form speech, such as in former conference calls. We have seen this textual corpus in the previous 2 days a lot, because this is regulated. So in inadvertent imprecision, on average, we think it's unlikely. So 10Ks are carefully curated and scrutinized. So if there is imprecise language, such as using likely, the word likely, it's deliberately added by managers or the writer of a 10K. Also, we think purposeful censoring of material information is not allowed on average, although there is a fraud for a smaller sample. On average, I think firms try not to lie there. Okay, that's our assumption to interpret our final result later. And then these are the examples of actual 10K disclosure with imprecise languages. This is 2000 and 2015 MD&A sections for the company called the Technical Communications Corporations. And then they both talk about cash requirement in the same section. And in 2000, the company has not been using any imprecise word in our keyword list. They were very straightforward, talking about number, and then they are just saying, without using imprecise keyword, they are discussing about their cash situations. In 2015, the company started using a lot of imprecise keyword. It is anticipated that our cash balances and generated from operation will be sufficient, and they are talking about forward-looking situation using the word anticipated. And then they also say, we believe in the long-term anticipated improvement of the prospects, so no worry about the cash requirement. That's basically what they say using these words. Okay, and then we also examine the characteristics of a company, firm characteristics, and also economic characteristics to see what kind of the firms are more likely to use imprecise languages in their document. So we find young, small companies use more imprecise languages. Companies with a higher growth opportunity measured by Tobin's Q use more imprecise language in their financial disclosure. Economic situation, when they are under severe product market competition and when they have a higher financial constraint, they are more likely to use imprecise word in their financial document. And we control for these characteristics in our market reaction analysis. So this is our core finding about market return reactions. We first plot the average cumulative buy and hold abnormal returns over multi-weeks filing window, post-filing window after 10K release date. And we compare high and low imprecision groups for their BAHR, cumulative BAHR. As you see in this figure, the black solid line is for high imprecision groups, and then gray solid line is for low imprecision group. You see the return reaction emerges around the 3 and 4th week, and then it stays permanent. It has no reversal. And then we see that high imprecision group runs about 1.8% annualized cumulative buy and hold return through the 10th week. We show the same thing, similar result in the regression format. We regress buy and hold returns weekly and also cumulative on imprecision measure. And then as you see here in week 3, the return reaction to imprecision, our measure of imprecision emerges, and it stays until week 7. So in sum, the effect is emerging from 3rd week, and it continues to 7th week, and it stays similar there by looking at this cumulative things. Emerges from 3rd week and stay there until 10th week, and there is no reversal. So based on this result, we don't think it's behavior reactions to non-meaningful informations. There is something fundamental information here in the imprecision measures, and the markets react with some delay, and then they do not update negatively later to the information. We have done lots of robustness check for the return reaction. We exclude the 10K filings with any future earnings announcement in the recent week period. And then just to show that this is not mechanically driven by a coming future earnings announcement, we also uses CAR instead of buy and hold returns to show that works. And also we just examine everything in the document, including exhibit, but we only focuses MD&A sections to see if it goes through, and we confirm that it is robust. We also purged other measures based on Rogram McDonald master dictionaries. So we take out all the information from their measures and still run the same thing, and we find the same similar result. And we directly test the information asymmetry, and we run information asymmetry on imprecision measure for the same setting, like a weekly setting. And first one is the bid-ask spread we examined. And as you see, bid-ask spread is decreasing over time, and especially week 3 to week 6, the effect is the greatest. For zero volume trading day, the second proxy for information asymmetry, you see that week 3 to week 5, week 3 and 4, the effect is the strongest. So it is consistent with our return reactions. So what value relevant information they have? That's our third questions. To test, we limited, actually it's a more than earnings a surprise. It can be in investment opportunity. It can be just managers' honest analysis about their cash flow. But we are limiting ourselves just to test, is there any earnings surprise, and earnings surprises is a part of the information. So this test is about earnings surprise using 2 different measures, standard unexpected earning indicator, which is dummy, and then standard unexpected earning rank based on percentile of the Swedish distribution in the previous period. So earnings a surprise, we regress on our measure of imprecisions. And we see here for the first quarter, which is the same quarter with the release of 10K information, but subsequent period in the quarter, we see that the dummy variable and rank are all positive to the imprecision keyword, imprecision, the use of imprecision percentage. And then the second quarter, the next quarter as well, there is a positive reactions. And then both combining quarters 0 and 1, we also see positive effect. But as you see here, a stronger effect exists in the first quarter, meaning that analysts initially underreact to this imprecision keyword, and then eventually they make a correction after a little bit of a time, so delay the correction they made in the quarter 1. Okay, I have only 1 minute, and then it's a good time to think about this conceptual map. Why positive? And people may wonder themselves why it has to be positive. So we drew some conceptual map here. So when disclosure is required by mandate, and then they have to require whatever situation, whether it's good news or voluntary, whether it's good news or bad news, they have to discuss it in the 10K. But when it comes to the voluntary choice, such as voluntary choice, especially the main voluntary choices of information for the company is the future information, forward-looking information, or information on intangible assets. When managers have a choices about voluntary disclosure of this type of information, managers will think about good news versus bad news. So when it is a good news, managers will likely to talk about it. But if it's a bad news, they don't have to talk about it now because it's voluntary. When it comes to the tangible or a realized state, they can now at the time talk about it. So they selectively choose the good news, but the news itself is imprecise at this moment. So they have to use the word imprecise keyword together. In conclusion, our analysis suggests that firms have to use linguistic imprecision when they release immature informations. We find the use of linguistic imprecision predict permanent and positive abnormal returns in the subsequent period, and it reduces the future information asymmetry. It predicts positive earnings surprise. We conclude imprecise language in 10K can contain novel information on positive, but yet unrealized immature prospects of the cash flows. Markets initially seems underreact, but digest it eventually in few weeks. Okay, I'm done, and I'm very much looking for discussion from Alexander.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katie. The discussion will be made by Alexander Hillert from Goethe University. Please, Alexander, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you. I hope that you can see my screen and can hear me. So thanks a lot for organizing this great conference and giving me the opportunity to discuss this paper. Katie did a great job in presenting the paper, so I will be very brief with my summary. So this paper wants to analyze what is the effect of imprecise statements in financial documents. And there are two competing views. On the one hand, we have the obfuscation hypothesis where managers are strategically hiding information, and this will lead to more information asymmetries. On the other hand, it could be that they want to disclose positive future information, which is, however, still uncertain, and therefore they are simply not able to use precise language. And in this case, it's actually good for markets as it decreases information asymmetries. Regarding the author's empirical approach, they have to come up with a measure that allows them to measure whether a statement is precise or imprecise. And I think they use a very innovative approach in going to Wikipedia or downloading the entire Wikipedia on one day in April 2017, which is like 17 million articles. And then they identify all sentences that have been marked by a weasel tag, obtain 433 sentences, and then finds that there are 6,000 unique words in these weasel sentences. And by comparing these sentences, the frequency of the words in these sentences to non-weasel sentences, they are able to come up with a list of imprecision keywords. And in the next steps, they follow a standard back of the words approach where they compute the percentage of imprecision words for all 10K filings in their sample, which are about 46,000 firm year observations. In terms of results, they find that higher imprecision positively predicts abnormal returns. So these firms tend to have higher future returns within the next 3 to 7 weeks. It's related to smaller bid-ask spreads and fewer days with zero trading volume. and it positively predicts future earnings surprises. So when I read this paper, my first idea is how do I have to think about imprecise information? What does it actually mean? And the first things that may come to my mind is that maybe it's just uncertainty or vagueness. So it could be related to the word list from Lachlan and MacDonald. However, this is not the case, as shown by the authors. There's only minimal overlap between the uncertainty word list and the model weak and model strong word list from Lachlan and MacDonald and their list of imprecise words. So the author's favorite interpretation is that it's positive but yet still uncertain information. So immature information, upcoming positive but yet uncertain prospects of earnings. And this statement has basically two key characteristics. It's positive information and it's about forward-looking statements. And first I would like to focus on this first part here. So the author writes the neighboring words in the weasel sentences that they suggest that imprecise language implies positive attributes. And if I take a look at table 2, which are the most frequent neighbor words, I'm not so sure that this actually needs to be the case. So you have a lot of negative words in here like loss, losses, impairment, termination, claims, default, collapse, and also like adverse, adversely, unable. And also what I realized is that there are a lot of litigious words in here like law, laws, regulation, contractual, legal, regulatory. So to understand a bit better what are actually these imprecise sentences, I decided to take a look at some examples. And the first company that came to my mind was Amazon, and I took a look at their most recent Form 10K filing. So basically, I took the top 10 imprecision words from the author's table 1, and I focused on the words that do not overlap with the uncertainty and model weak word list. So search for imprecision words like other, clear, number of, barriers. And then you find sentences like, it's not clear how existing laws governing issues such as property ownership, libel, data protection, and personal privacy apply to aspects of our operations. Our international sales and operations are subject to a number of risks, including we have acquired and invested in a number of companies. These transactions create risks such as a large number of jurisdictions regulate our operations, and many more examples. Just one final example. We may recognize additional tax expenses, including other liabilities for tax collection obligations, other laws, and accounting rules in various jurisdictions. What these sentences have in common is that they all come from item 1A risk factors. Of course, there are also imprecise sentences in the other parts of the document, but from this example, I conclude that they are kind of overrepresented in this risk factor section. And this made me wonder what actually captures your, what actually proxies your imprecision measure for. Now you could argue that Amazon is perhaps a special case as there is more regulation going on for these large tech companies, but if you look at other companies doing a very different kind of business like the Coca-Cola company, you also find that there are a lot of imprecise words in their item 1A risk factors. And they're also talking about operational risks and regulatory risks. And what I would like to do is that you try to better disentangle what actually captures your imprecision measure. And I think the 10Ks allow you to do that. So you could split the 10Ks into different parts. On the one hand, focus on imprecise terms that are related to risk, regulatory risk, operational risks. So look at sections like the item 1A risk factor sections where you have a lot of imprecise words that we've just seen, or item 3 legal proceedings, or item 7A, which is about market risk. And what you, I think, are interested in is positive fundamental information, which would be more like item 1 about the company's business or item 7 in the MD&A section. During your talk, you mentioned that you also look at your MD&A section and find the same results. I couldn't find that in the versions that you sent me, but I think that's kind of goes in line with my intuition that what you are after is you want to identify parts of the 10Ks that discuss firms' operations and not parts that discuss other factors. And I could even imagine that imprecise words in the risk factor section have a different effect than imprecise words in the section where it's about the firm's business. I would like to briefly mention 2 related papers. So there's one paper by Tarek Hassan who talks about or who analyzes firm-level political risks. They do not use 10K filings, they focus on earnings conference calls, so that could be a bit related. And a paper by Cohen and co-authors who also want to analyze new information in 10K filings, 10Q filings. However, they use a different approach. They look at the similarity between this year's 10K and last year's 10K. And whenever there is a drop in textual similarity, they consider that to be a sign that there is new information in there. So that seems also related to your paper. Interestingly, they find if there's a drop in similarity, so if there's new information in the 10K filing, then this predicts lower future returns. Next, I would like to talk about how you, I think, can strengthen your hypotheses. First, I would like to come back to the part on the forward-looking statements. The second characteristic of these imprecise sentences is that they should be forward-looking, and Lee 2010 identifies forward-looking sentences. So he develops a list of forward-looking keywords, and I think it would be nice if you could use his list of forward-looking keywords and then actually test whether you have more forward-looking statements in imprecise sentences than in the rest of the document. And just looking at the similarity between the keywords that Lee identifies, like will, plan, and your most frequent neighboring words, I'm quite sure that you will find evidence that is in line with your stories that you have more forward-looking information in these imprecise sentences, but I think it would be nice to have some empirical tests to provide some numbers. Also, coming back to your more general question about differentiating between the obfuscation view and the positive information view, I think it could also make sense to look at imprecise words in non-forward-looking statements. I think here you could argue if a manager decides to provide imprecise information for events that happened in the past, then the manager probably wants to not disclose this information, so he could use imprecision as a way to obfuscate the information. In contrast, if it's a forward-looking statement, then you can plausibly argue the manager cannot know the information, so he has no other choice than providing using imprecise words to describe this yet uncertain information. So I think that could also be helpful to better differentiate between these two competing hypotheses. So now, next, I would like to come back to some statements that you make. So you argue that investors underreact to this positive information. So on page 3, you write that investors initially underreact, but eventually digest it. And you find that on average, it takes 3 to 7 weeks for this positive information to be incorporated into prices. And I think there is probably some cross-sectional variation. We know that for some firms, like large firms, firms with a lot of analyst coverage, information diffuses faster than for small firms, firms with little or no analyst coverage. So I think it would be interesting to analyze cross-sectional interactions. So for example, do you see a faster information diffusion for large firms, older firms with more mature business, more analyst coverage, or more news coverage? Does it take longer for complicated firms? Also, you could look at the readability complexity of the 10K filings. If the annual report is more complex, and it will take longer for this information to be incorporated into prices. The second comment is about the role of uncertainty. In your abstract, you argue that imprecise language in corporate disclosures can convey valuable information on firms' fundamentals during uncertain times. So this during uncertain times reminds me that maybe you want to test time series interactions. So do you see a stronger relation between imprecision and future returns, or imprecision and decreases in the bid-ask spread in periods of high uncertainty? And does the effect get weaker in periods of low uncertainty? So you may want to do a time series split, for example, based on the volatility index, or you could use a Baker-Bloom-Davis economic policy uncertain index, or could look at recession periods where there is overall higher uncertainty. And I think could also be interesting to look at the cross-section. So do you see stronger effects for firms that have a more uncertain business model? So firms with more uncertain words in their 10K filings, firms with higher analyst forecast dispersion, or firms with high idiosyncratic volatility, younger firms, non-dividend paying firms. And I think providing some empirical tests to support your statements that would also strengthen your paper. My next comment is about your main return table. So you say that you find a permanent effect on stock prices. However, you only analyze 10 weeks, and I think it would be nice to add some more long-run results, so see whether there is some reversal at a later point in time. So for example, for the momentum effect, we all know that it takes more than 1 year, or it takes about 1 year for the reversal to start. So I think 10 weeks might not be long enough. In your main specification, you use market adjusted returns. I think it could be nice to use DGTW adjusted returns, which would also control for non-linearities and would take into account size, book to market, and momentum. And as your results are related to positive future cash flows, profitability, could also make sense to take the Farmer-French 5-factor model and not just the Farmer-French 3-factor model. Then one question, how do you control for the listings for the longer periods in your regressions? The number of observations gets smaller, so I assume that some companies drop out. So do you apply a delisting correction a la Shumway or Shumway Water? So, and I think you do not apply any price or size filters. Do these results hold when you have more an investable universe, like exclude stocks with a price below $5, stocks with a market cap that places them in the first NYSE size decile? So I think that would also be a test. And one minor comment, you standardize your variables, and this may introduce a look-ahead bias, as you assume that an investor in 1997 would already know the distribution of imprecision over your entire sample period up to 2015. I think that I'm running out of time, so I will skip my points on data and methodology and briefly conclude. I think your paper addresses a highly relevant research question and has also a lot of implications for regulators. To me, the interpretation of your measure is not fully clear yet, and I think there are ways to better differentiate between potential interpretations for your measure, and I think you could give us more support for your hypotheses by analyzing cross-section and time series interactions. And yeah, I will send you the slides and you see my comments on the data and methodological issues. And I've enjoyed reading the paper and look forward to getting a revised version. So thank you very much.
Many thanks, Alexander.